Welcome everyone, this is Alexei Berlako at the microphone. My guest is Professor of Social Sciences, Dr. Habilitatis of Military Sciences, retired Division General Bogusław Pacek. Good day. Regarding Russian reinforcements in Belarus and near Finland's borders, despite claims Russia lacks capacity for further offense in Ukraine, these forces are still being deployed. Belarus is deeply embedded within the Russian system. Full integration of Russia and Belarus is ongoing, but militarily Belarus is already absorbed. Logistics and possibly reconnaissance remain somewhat autonomous, while all other parts are fully under Russian control. Thus, Russia can enter Belarus anytime without preemptive troop movements or formal approval, with orders issued solely by Russian commanders. The use of Belarus is a significant strategic component, most often serving the purpose of intimidation, provocation, and a form of military simulation employed by Russia in its rivalry with Western countries, with NATO, and with the European Union. It plays a major role in psychological warfare. The situation concerning Finland is clear. It is a country that borders Russia directly, and it is only natural that it feels threatened, as do the Baltic states and other countries located along the Russian frontier. Belarus, in the context of the war in Ukraine, apart from a few episodes of direct involvement, is primarily used as a platform for strategic signaling, suggesting the possibility of maneuvers, large-scale operations, or even an offensive, which, according to many signals, may originate from Belarus. These operations are ultimately not carried out, yet they force Ukraine to redeploy its forces in anticipation, because it is difficult to dismiss the possibility of such an attack emerging from Belarusian territory. Belarus must be seen as an active participant alongside Russia in this war and the broader NATO competition. Belarus plays a unique role in the war against Ukraine. Regarding NATO countries, particularly Finland, Poland, and the Baltic states, which are the three primary actors, Belarus is used chiefly for intimidation and strategic signaling that implies uncertainty, whether the situation remains part of psychological maneuvering or is transitioning into preparations for a genuine military assault. Consequently, it should come as no surprise that numerous actions by Russia or Belarus lead to the scrambling of Polish helicopters or aircraft on standby alert. There is no certainty that this is still part of the game. It may, in fact, be the beginning of operations targeting our nation. Has the widely anticipated Russian offensive in eastern Ukraine, announced by President Putin, already begun? In your opinion, General, are there real indications that we may now be witnessing its climax? This is a very significant matter you raise, and it marks a very critical stage of the war. I personally define it as potentially the penultimate stage of this conflict, because on the 3rd of July this year, in a telephone conversation with Trump, Putin announced a 100-day offensive, and that offensive is now underway. He is carrying out what he promised. The image we often see presented by the media is somewhat softer than the reality on the ground. The current Russian offensive encompasses not only the four long-known oblasts, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, and Donetsk, but also a deep incursion into Dnipro and a strong, forceful push into Kharkiv region. Cities such as Kharkiv and Sumy, along with surrounding areas, are increasingly featured in reports. Therefore, I believe the offensive today spans 6 regions, 6 oblasts, not 4, and the 4 we speak of less frequently in sharper terms now have, in fact, been far more consolidated by Russian forces than they were 6 months ago. If one looks closely at a map of Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson oblasts, one sees that Russian troops have managed to shift significantly westward. This progress is far greater than what we witnessed half a year or even a year ago. While these territories have not yet been fully brought under Russian occupation, the advantage is clearly in Russia's favor. Moreover, Russia is attacking all of Ukraine. It is false to claim that Russia targets only these 4 or 6 oblasts. Odessa is under assault through regular airstrikes. I fear that Russia intends another attack on the Odessa-Mykolaiv region, which would verge on catastrophic if it succeeded in severing Ukraine's access to the Black Sea. The Black Sea is vital not only militarily, but above all economically, essential to the country's survival. Furthermore, Lviv, Kyiv, and the entirety of Ukraine are under attack. Russia seeks not merely tactical victories but aims to secure the widest possible military dominance, this being, in my view, the penultimate stage of its campaign. Anyone who believes this is still the war of 6 months or a year ago is mistaken. It has changed. Putin employs a variety of tools, political, diplomatic, military, and disinformation, all to influence Ukrainian society, wear down its resolve, and fracture its elite. Today we observe significant troubles among the elite, including the government leadership in Kyiv. There are changes in the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, along with rumors and attempts to discredit President Zelensky, which occur not only publicly, but through the dangerous weapon of gossip that spreads among people. These are the results of effective operations by the Russian Federation. Moscow has scored many successes here, and life itself delivers conditions that facilitate its efforts, such as corruption, which is an inherent feature of every war. In this war, corruption in Ukraine is particularly pronounced. Publicizing it has its impact, while concealing it is also problematic. There is no perfect solution. All of this demonstrates, in my view, that the authorities in Moscow aim to achieve as much as possible during these 100 days, so that Russia may speak from a position of strength in any potential peace negotiations. Moscow calls for peace talks with Ukraine, but on unacceptable terms, largely demanding the West, not just Ukraine, to concede. Ukraine is pressured to give up Russian-occupied territory. Yet at present, there is no clear understanding of where that territory ends. For many months, it comprised 4 oblasts and Crimea. Today, the boundaries are unknown. Putin continues to revise and escalate his demands. He is now making very aggressive demands of Western nations as well. These are not limited to the demilitarization of Ukraine or barring its membership in the North Atlantic Alliance, but include the westward redrawing of NATO's borders. These demands are deliberately inflated, and Moscow is fully aware that they will not be met. They serve the strategic function of justifying its ongoing military actions. I fear that Ukraine currently possesses too few forces to approach this stage of the war as it did in earlier phases, with confidence, resolve, and the message, "We are fighting, do not worry, we will prevail." Today, Russia's advantage is simply too great, while the support extended by Western nations remains insufficient to genuinely affirm that message. Many declarations have been made, and Europe shows willingness to act. However, the US policy shift does not benefit Ukraine or Europe's security and must be openly acknowledged. The 50 days granted by Donald Trump, the President of the United States, for President Putin to show restraint represent almost 2 months, precisely the timeline that President Putin indicated in an earlier conversation as being necessary to prepare his offensive. Therefore, 50 days is a considerable period, and everything now depends on the character of those days. Will these be days of regular deliveries of artillery shells and various battlefield equipment, even at the minimal level, or will the combat be extremely limited? Because today, Ukraine's fundamental problem, and this is not classified information, it is clearly visible, is its lack of protection against aerial strikes. There is no remedy for this. Either one has Patriot missiles or one does not. Either one possesses launchers or one does not. Ukraine's attacks on targets inside Russian territory have prompted real responses, clearly showing that Russia is not prepared to defend its own homeland. It is prepared for war. Russia is strengthening its operations abroad, but remains unprepared to defend its own territory. Ukraine's successful Kursk offensive and ongoing drone strikes inside Russia reveal this clear unpreparedness. These operations reach deep into Moscow Oblast, St. Petersburg Oblast, and multiple other regions. They penetrate hundreds, nearly thousands, of kilometers beyond the border, exposing Russia's vulnerability. But Russia's greatest weakness is its economy. If the West were to act more decisively through sanctions, there would be a real opportunity to stop President Putin. The EU has shown progress. Slovakia, which blocked the 18th sanctions package against Russia, has withdrawn its objection and will no longer block it. The challenge is to convince the US, especially the President, to enforce the ready sanctions package, as Congress is prepared to impose harsh measures on all buying Russian energy, especially crude oil. Hope rests on stronger Western, especially US engagement, though this is a double-edged sword. If the West gets more involved in Ukraine, that's exactly what China wants. China aims to draw the US deeper into the Ukraine war to boost its own strategic power in the Far East, where a US-China conflict might arise. Amid this complexity, Ukraine faces the toughest position. Thank you. Thank you.